Hi friends, Aitherea here, and it's time to yap about the best game that I played all year, Final Fantasy 16. I actually can't even remember what games I played this year. Baldur's Gate 3 came out, was it last year or the year before? I don't remember, so I feel like Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the best games I've ever played, so that's always at the top of the list. But this year, I think I played Pal World. I played 16. I feel like I'm missing something. Obviously, I played 14, but I feel like there's another game in there that I played that I'm not remembering. But Final Fantasy 16 feels like a very underrated game, probably because it came out a year ago, but they only let people who owned a PS5 actually play it, and I feel like that really kneecapped them. Talking to people in my Discord server, shout out to my Discord server, you're welcome to join. It seems like Final Fantasy 16 did not do as well as perhaps SE was hoping, and that it didn't really get like a lot of hype or as many sales. Like it genuinely seems from what people are saying, just because I'm dumb and I don't bother to look anything up and I just believe the people in my Discord server, but it sounds like it's an underrated game, and I'm here to tell you that it was fantastic. Probably for sure the best game I played all year, and my overall rating of it is, in fact, a 9 out of 10. So before I get into my Yap session review of this game, you should know that there will be spoilers. So if you haven't played the game, don't watch this. Get the game whenever you have the chance and play it whenever you have the chance, because you're in for a fantastic time. Also, Clive is incredibly hot, so whether you're male or female, I don't think that male, female, or something else, whatever you identify as, doesn't matter. He's like universally hot to everyone, right? Like he's kind of like Henry Cavill, which is it doesn't matter what you are, he's gonna look hot to you. It's not gay because he's just that good looking. Okay, anyway, time to yap. I don't really even know where to start because I feel like there's so much to say, but maybe I want to talk about why I think the game is a 9 out of 10. And I feel like the reason is because the overall experience was incredible. I really enjoyed the story. The game is a little bit more mature, like it's definitely meant more for an adult audience because there are some really heavy themes, like slavery is throughout the game, oppression. And also, I mean, like you see people getting hurt. There's a point where you cut somebody's hands off in the game, so it can get slightly graphic at times. There's also a bit of sex in the game, although it's not, I don't think, I mean, they're naked, but you don't really see anything, and it's not super graphic. So it's kind of funny because it's definitely something I would consider a mature game, and I wouldn't want, like, if I had a kid, I wouldn't want them playing it. But I would say I feel like a lot of teenagers could probably handle the game because it's not so graphic. It's kind of funny. It's like Final Fantasy version of mature, if that makes sense, where it's like mature, but it's like also kind of still watered down to be like appropriate. I don't know how to even explain that. Like it's not like Baldur's Gate 3 where like you click on because you can toggle on and off if they're naked, and they're like fully naked in Baldur's Gate 3. It's not like that. It's definitely a little more pulled back. But anyways, that's a kind of aside from the point. So the reason I think it's a 9 out of 10 is because I think it has a really compelling story. There's a lot that's going on in this world, and it's not just like the more heavy aspects of it, like the fact that there's a lot of oppression and slavery happening, and that our main character actually has to deal with this oppression because he has the blessing of the Phoenix, which was given to him by his brother who is a dominant, having the power of the Phoenix icon. He gives Clive the blessing of the Phoenix, and after his mother decides to betray Rosaria, he then becomes a bearer, and he is branded as a bearer and made to work basically on the front lines as a soldier and treated like crap. Nobody treats bearers well. It's not even just like, oh, they're slaves. It's like, we also hate them and think they're worthless and don't care if they die and they're trash. Their existence is horrible kind of thing. It's like, it's really bad. It's really, really bad. So the story is really compelling and it's made more interesting because the main character himself has to deal with this oppression. He has to face it. It is part of who he is because he receives that blessing. But then there's so much more beyond that. Like, it's not just a story about trying to change the world and save bearers and do something about oppression. It's also a story about this God and this God that is affecting the world negatively, that is trying to take away free will, that's trying to essentially eradicate the entire human race for their own sake. It's about the world that has been corrupted, the very land itself drying out, becoming unlivable, all because of one person or one God's goals, right? So there's so much to the story. And there's also such a rich and deep world here. It feels very fleshed out. It feels very believable, very real. They did a really good job with world building, with creating all of these different nations and the wars that they are in and why they are in those wars, because they're fighting over resources, the mother crystal, and they mine the mother crystals, and their whole way of life is based on using magic from the mother crystals while also oppressing bearers who are born with magic. Isn't that pretty hypocritical? Yes, it is. But their whole lifestyle is either using crystals to power things and provide magic and warmth and everything they do, right? Like, that's their technology, is those crystals, that, or they literally use bearers who they have enslaved to do those things for them. And it's so interesting because even in a country like Rosaria, where the bearers are treated better, they are ultimately still slaves. They're still enslaved. So such a rich world, and kind of going off of that, I thought it was really cool that they added the two NPCs, Tomes, or his name is Harpocrates, but his nickname is Tomes, and then Vivian, is it Ninetails? Vivian, the lady, she's another NPC that helps you kind of, if you're confused. She'll actually, if you click on her and talk to her, she like recounts the story for you. You can go and like look through the different things that have happened. You can look at the maps. You can see where each different like country and nation is. And I found those two NPCs to be a really great addition. Tomes is more like lore. You can look into different characters and find blurbs about them. You can look into, again, the different nations and find out information about them. It's just really, really helpful when you have a world this large and this interconnected, because you do end up facing kind of like every nation in Alisae, which is basically the continent that they're on. You do end up having to go to each and every nation and deal with people from those nations. So it's all very interconnected. It's all part of the sort of backstory and the stuff that's going on in the background with the wars and stuff between the other countries. So it can get a little confusing, but they added those NPCs in there, which are really, really great for you to be able to go back and look. So obviously the world building and the story itself is a huge reason for why it is 9 out of 10. I think we also have some really, really great characters. Everyone's favorite character is Sid. Sid is my favorite character too. But I also think Clive is really cool. I feel like at the beginning of the story, Sid kind of really outshines everybody. But after he passes away, you really do get a better look at Clive, and he becomes this really, he honestly is like the ultimate hero character, because, I mean, obviously he's handsome, but he has so many, like he just has all those like perfect hero characteristics where he is selfless, courageous, brave, powerful, kind, altruistic, like all of these different facets that you kind of expect from a hero. He's willing to sacrifice himself to save the world, if you will. So Clive ends up also being a really cool character. He kind of comes across as like a little gruff at times, but I don't want to call him a tsundere because I don't really feel like that particularly matches him. But it's funny because he's like so masculine and manly and stuff. But then he also is like this incredibly caring character. If you do the side quests, it really shows you even more, because He has such a transformation too, because he starts off, kind of jaded because, he has been faced with, I mean, he's been a slave, right? He's been a slave for, I think it's like 5 years when you first start. And he definitely is a little bit guarded. He doesn't like when he finally meets Sid, he's kind of like, yeah, that's cool and all what you're doing, but I'm busy. I need to get revenge for my brother. Like that kind of thing. Like he definitely isn't the person that he used to be or the person that he becomes later. I feel like the person he becomes thanks to Sid is the person he always was, that kind, caring person that was always part of him. But after the traumas that he went through with his brother's death, and then also being in like his brother's death, his mom being the one that betrayed them, his mom being essentially responsible for his father's death, for his nation's downfall, and you could even argue for his brother's death since she was the one who brought all of those soldiers there and caused her brother to have to prime and all that. Like, you could argue that, she's responsible and she's also the person that enslaved him, her own son. So he's been through a lot, okay? So he definitely starts off much more like stoic and kind of brusque and seemingly uncaring. Like if you do the side quests in the very beginning, where it's kind of like more introducing you to what side quests are and what people will ask him to do stuff and he'll be like, fine. Like the responses are always just like, fine. Like they're not very nice, But then later, after, he has some growth as a character, all of the side quests you do are like, of course. Like he's very like, of course I would do that for you. Like I want to help you. It's just such a different vibe because he is at heart a caring person. And of course he wants to help his allies. And yeah, he wants to help his allies because it helps his cause, but also he wants to save people. When he finds out about the opportunity to save bearers, he jumps on it because he too, obviously he knows what it's like because he has the brand until they remove it, but he knows what it's like. He wants to save them. He wants to give them a better life where they can live freely and safely and not be oppressed and enslaved. So Clive also has some really interesting growth where he kind of gets to go back to the person he was. And it is our beloved Sid, I feel, that gives him the opportunity to do that because when Clive is at his worst, not only has he just, experienced that trauma of being enslaved for 5 years and having to kill people on orders, he basically had to do what he was told kind of thing. Not only was he enslaved, but he also finds out that he is Ifrit. And it was him who killed his brother. Of course, we later find out that Joshua did not die thanks to the power of the Phoenix and the Phoenix's ability for healing, self-healing, and rebirth and whatnot. So Joshua was thankfully fine, but he didn't know that, So it's like he's at his worst, and Sid is the one who helps him keep going, who is like, you're still alive, so you can be useful. Instead of running away from your problems, instead of saying kill me or killing yourself or whatever it may be, instead of dying, make yourself useful and atone for the things that you may or may not have done. And it's also great because Jill is there for him and he tells her that he's a freak and he's the one who hurt his brother. And at this point, they also are saying that there's still a dominant of fire. So she's like, you know what? Let's face this together. Let's see what this dominant of fire is about. And, whatever ends up being the truth, I'm here for you and we'll face it together. And that's kind of where the romance comes in. I think the romance in this game, it's very, very subtle. I will admit it's not like it's the best romance plot ever. If you are a romance stan, I don't know how well this would really like itch. I'm a romance stan. I don't know how well this would really itch it because I feel like the romance is not at all a priority in the game, and they kind of end up together because she's like the only well, she's not the only female character, but she's like, his childhood friend and like the kind of main female character that they have. She's in your party all the time with you, so it's kind of like, who else would he end up with? You know what I mean? If he's gonna end up with anyone at all, who else would he end up with? So it is really subtle and it's not something they spend a lot of time on, but I do still really appreciate the relationship that they've created between Clive and Jill, because I ultimately feel that it's a really healthy example of a relationship because it's two people who are there for each other, both romantically and physically and like emotionally, you know? So they provide each other with that emotional support that they need, but they're also there for each other in terms of battle. Like they both want to protect each other, they both want to work together and fight together. Jill hates being left behind. And overall, even though, you know, it's not the best romance story ever because it is kind of just this subtle thing on the sidelines where it's like, oh, and they fall in love. I still think it is really nice because it does portray a really healthy relationship. And yeah, I don't know, to me, it didn't necessarily feel too good to be true. It just felt like a good example of a healthy relationship. Okay, so we've established that the story itself, I mean, I kind of feel like the actual story is a 10 out of 10. I also really enjoyed the gameplay in terms of the combat. I thought the action combat was really, really, really fun. It is right up my alley. I personally really liked the difficulty. It was perfect for me where it was like engaging without being necessarily hard. And depending on what kit you would run with the icons you would choose, it could be easier or harder depending on which skills you liked. I usually would run the Phoenix. I really liked the original Phoenix skills that we got, both with the Phoenix Shift and then also the like AoE one that you spin in a circle and kind of like throws the mobs out, and the little punch one. Those I really liked. I basically kept on my bar throughout the whole game, and I also just thought Phoenix Shift was really useful. Then I would usually run Cold Snap, best skill in the game. Like, that's the best shift skill you can get, is the Cold Snap. And it was really, really cool because eventually I discovered, and they might have told you that this in a tutorial part somewhere, a pop-up, I don't remember. But I eventually discovered that if you did a precision dodge with Cold Snap, you would permafrost the target, which was really, really cool. It was so cool. You permafrost them and then you just get like some seconds to just beat on them where you don't have to worry about dodging or anything. But of course, I think the dodge aspect of the game is really cool. It's really fun to have a game where you need a dodge, and obviously there's not every single dodge you do is going to be perfect, but if you do that like precision dodge, which is almost like the last second dodge where it's like beat on them, beat on them, beat on them, and then ooh, like you're doing as much DPS as you can, and then you precision dodge at the last second, and then you can do an attack back. Like, it's really cool. I love games like this where you have this action combat that it requires you to dodge, because I just think it's really fun. So that was really cool, but I would run Cold Snap, and then I would run with that. I would usually have Diamond Dust and the Judgment Bolt, I think it's called. The big fat like burst skill, the really long cooldown one from Sid. And then the last thing I would do is I would do Garuda for her little pull skill, because if you got a target's stagger bar to like halfway, it's like the little yellow bar, then you could pull them and like stagger them. And yeah, it was that was just a cool thing. So I would use that. And then on that one, I would usually have Giga Flare. Oh, actually, that one I would have Giga Flare and Sid's skill. And then with Cold Snap, I had Diamond Dust. And I originally had one of the like simple like lightning skills. But then later at the end of the game, when I did the DLC and I got Leviathan, I got one of those skills that was like a bunch of, it was like maybe Cross Swell, I don't remember the name. It was like a bunch of bubbles that like pulls all the targets in together, which I thought was really useful. So that was kind of what I was running, and I really enjoyed the combat overall. My only gripe with the combat would be, first of all, the hard mode should have been available immediately, because while I thought it was the perfect difficulty for me, and I personally probably would not go for a hard mode, because I kind of enjoy being able to like beat the crap out of stuff and not have it be like super hard. But if you're somebody that wants more of an Elden Ring experience where you want it to be difficult, you want to have to dodge more, you want to have to worry about, you know, taking hits because the more hits you take, you might die, like all these things, then like the hard mode should have been available to you, because I'm going to be honest, like I'm not that good at games. I feel like I'm pretty good at like 14 and MMOs because I grew up playing MMOs, but like I didn't really play that many RPG games growing up or shooter games or anything like that. So like I'm not that good at games. So this difficulty for me was perfect. I got hit plenty. I used my pots plenty. But also, I still felt a lot of satisfaction when I did get that precision dodge, when I did get that permafrost, stuff like that. So for me, it was great. But like for some people who are better at gaming, this probably was too easy. So the fact that you could not do the hard mode until after you've already beat the game is just a choice that boggles my mind. I will say one other kind of gripe I have with the combat is I didn't really like the icon fights that much. I didn't hate them, and it definitely got better as you got further into the game and your icon got more skills. Then it definitely became a little bit more interesting and fun. But for me, the fights where you're like semi-primed and you have access to all of your different icon skills were easily the most fun. But there are a couple cool icon fights, and overall, I think the cinematics as part of the fights was really fun. There were a few moments where I felt like the cinematics were maybe a little bit too long. And I was like, okay, let me at him. Let me at him. Let me have control again. Come on, let me at him. But overall, some of the cinematics were really cool. And my favorite ones, like aside from like the actual story-based cinematics, but there are some cinematics that happen like every time you fight. And my favorite one is when you have a enemy like knocked down on the ground and they're like near death, and then you run up to them and hit them. There's like a few different things that Clive might do. He might like smash a burning sword into them. He might like kick them. And it was just, I love it. It's so much fun. I really, really love that little aspect of it. Okay, so all these things are why the game is fantastic to me, because it has incredible world building, really compelling, interesting, fun to play story, really, really fun gameplay in terms of the combat. So now let's talk about the negatives a little bit before we get into the ending. And I think the biggest con of this game and why it ends up being a 9 out of 10 and not a 10 out of 10 is the side quests. So this is probably something you've already heard. Everybody probably has been saying this, but I mean, I have mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, I did every single side quest in the game, okay? On the one hand, I appreciate the extra lore they give. I appreciate the extra world building. I appreciate the extra characterization they give. There's some really cool things that you will learn in the side quests that you might not know about if you don't do them. One of the most interesting side quests to me was there was this girl who could not find her pet, Sophie, and I ended up realizing this before I finished the quest, but I went, oh no, Sophie's a bearer, isn't she? She considered Sophie to be like a toy or a pet. She couldn't find her, and Clive finds her dead, petrified, because she had used her powers too often. Why was she using her powers? Because the child wanted her to. The child ordered her to. And the child saw her as a plaything, and she was complaining about how every time one of her Sophies died, her father would complain it would take him forever to get her a new one. She wants a new Sophie. Where's my new Sophie? It was so messed up. It was so messed up. And Clive takes that moment to teach the child that this is a person, not a toy. Because to her, that person's life, that Sophie's life, was dispensable because it was the same as a toy. Like, imagine if you had a plastic toy, a Barbie, a G.I. Joe, whatever it is that you grew up with. You may have enjoyed playing with that toy, but at the end of the day, it's a piece of plastic and your parents can replace it. If your Barbie breaks, the head falls off and you can't put it back on, you cut off the hair, whatever, and you're upset and you want a new one, you lose it, whatever, your parents can go out and buy you the exact same toy. And that was how this girl was viewing the bearers. And it was these kinds of side quests that I think were incredible because, again, they really added to the lore and really showed you just how messed up this oppression is, this world that we're living is, and how even children are being indoctrinated and being taught these things about bearers. And yeah, so I really loved those kinds of side quests. There was a few other ones that I really liked as well. But the only issue, the main issue with them is even though some of the side quests were great for this kind of world building, for characterization, like there was one that was about Otto and Sid's relationship and how they met. That was really cool. The problem, though, is they really messed with the pace of the game. I thought the story itself, most of it had a really good pace. I would say, honestly, it feels pretty high stakes the whole time. I feel like there's only a couple lulls in the story, but for most of the story, you're just like, oh my god, I want to do the next part, I want to do the next part, I want to do the next part. And the problem would be that, like, you would end up having all these side quests come up, and if you chose to do those side quests, you're spending like hours doing side quests, and it really, really messes with the pacing of the game because you're just like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening. I really want to figure out, like, I want to find out what the next thing is happening in the story, especially because I personally felt the story wasn't super predictable. There was some parts that were, but I would say, like, throughout the story, I was, like, thrown for a loop a few times. Like, at the very beginning of the story, because I never watched the trailer for the game. I just, like, friends told me it was good, and I wanted to try another Final Fantasy game. I knew it was action combat and stuff. I thought Clive was hot. So I was like, this is, I would like to try this game, right? So I never watched the trailer, and so for me, it was actually a really cool experience because I was, like, questioning who killed Joshua. Like, at one point I was like, maybe it was Clive, but then I remember feeling like, after all, it wasn't him, and there really was, like, this other entity in a hood, and, like, because I knew, like, in my head I was like, well, Clive has to be some sort of icon, right? Like, I wasn't completely knowing nothing about the game, thanks to, like, some people talking in my Discord, and also, the crossover event. So I knew, like, I didn't really know a lot about the game, but I did have, like, I knew, like, Clive was some sort of icon. I just didn't know what. So then I was like, okay, maybe he is Ifrit and it was him and he did it. But then I really did get thrown for a loop where for a moment I really thought, like, it wasn't him. There was somebody else there that did it. But of course, then I did find out Clive is Ifrit. And there's a few other things, like, throughout the story where you're just like, oh my god, what is happening? What the heck is going on? Like, you don't know, like, what Ultima's goal is or things like that. And you just, like, really want to know. So I did feel like you constantly want to keep playing. Like, it's a game that you want to keep playing, and you want to specifically keep playing the main story to figure out what's happening. But the problem is that then you'd get all these side quests, and if you choose to do them, it really got in the way of that feeling of, like, wanting to binge, like the page turner. Like, when they say, like, a book is really a page turner, this story was absolutely a page turner. But if you decided to do those side quests, you kind of got forced to stop turning the pages. And I remember, like, then that feeling in me of, like, wanting to keep going, wanting to binge would kind of die down a little bit because, that excitement, kind of gets lost when you spend hours doing these less exciting side quests. And again, like I said, mixed feelings because some of them were really interesting and I liked the lore, but they weren't integrated in a way that was seamless, Like, Baldur's Gate 3, the cool thing about that game is that I didn't even realize I was playing side quests. Like, I'm not kidding. I didn't realize I was playing side quests until somebody in my Discord was like, oh, I finished Baldur's Gate 3 in, like, a ridiculously short amount of hours because all they did was, like, the main story quest. They, like, speed ran the main story quest and they didn't do a single side quest. And I was like, wait, those are side quests? Like, that was so seamless. And I do think it's hard for games to be that good. I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 is basically a masterpiece, and it is hard for games to integrate side quests that well, but that was really a weak point of Final Fantasy 16. But because I loved the story and the overall experience so much, that's why I'm only knocking off 1 point and still giving it a 9 out of 10, because it doesn't bother me that much. Like, yes, I acknowledge that it is a problem, it is a flaw, it is a weak point, but it doesn't, like, ruin the game for me. The game was still an incredible time and an incredible experience that I loved so, so much. Okay, so before I get into my thoughts on the ending, there's one more thing I want to talk about that I felt was kind of like weak or fell flat for me. It was honestly a little bit confusing. And it was this idea that both Joshua and Jill stated that Clive was trying to take on everything alone. And I was just like, but he's been traveling with Jill for, like, at least 3/4 of the story. Like, most of the story, he has at least Jill with him. When he doesn't have Jill with him, he has Torgal with him. And sometimes he'll have Jill and Sid, Jill and Joshua, or if Jill stays back, he just has Joshua. Like, He has Gav. Like, I'm like, the whole time he's been relying on other people. Why do they keep acting like they literally had this sort of like Alisae thing in here where it's like, you try to do everything alone. Make sure to take your friends. I'm like, but he's not been doing literally anything alone. He's been getting help, accepting help the entire time, and very rarely actually doing stuff alone. Like, I guess a lot of the icon fights he did do alone, so like maybe that's kind of where it's coming from. Or at least in Jill's case, she also could have been talking about the mental burden of everything, because he doesn't he wants to be a strong leader, right? He doesn't want to share his worries with the people that are following him and viewing him as a leader, because you want your leader to be confident, because if Clive seems worried and afraid and all these things, then that can cause panic among the people that are living at the hideaway and whatnot. So like maybe that's what she was getting at, was that maybe he was holding some of it in. I did think that moment between them was a very beautiful one. It was really sweet, the little heart to heart that they had, with like that moment where she ends up giving him her power, and then they do the devil's tangle. But it was a really, really lovely scene. It was really beautiful. But then after that, Joshua like punches him in the face. And he was like mad about the fact that Clive took Jill's power, and the way that it's phrased makes it seem like Clive didn't give her a choice or like forced her or something weird like that. And while I'm grateful that we have like Joshua standing up for Jill, really cool, love that we've got men respecting women and standing up for them, what are you standing up for? Like, she freely offers it to him. Like, she's just like, here you go, take it. And I was kind of surprised, because I felt like he didn't really, I kind of wanted the scene to have her take his hand and put it on her, but he just puts his hand on her, and I was kind of disappointed in that, because he felt a little bit too, in my opinion, a little bit too excited to get it. And I was like, okay, let's calm down there. But he didn't just like take it from her. He never even asked. She offered and he was like, okay, thanks. So I don't know, like the Joshua thing kind of like was weird to me, but I actually saw a comment in a comment section on YouTube of someone saying that the Japanese version is different. Apparently in the Japanese version, Jill says that she's going to protect him, and he fears for her life, so he decides to take her power to prevent her from putting herself in front of him and putting herself in harm's way to save him. Because you have to remember, by this point, she had already been kidnapped by Barnabas, by Waloed, and whatnot. So, and that isn't even the first time, because that not only was she shackled and almost murdered by Kupka, then she gets captured by Barnabas because she protects Clive. So I can understand in the Japanese version of things why he would do that. I don't like it. And it does make more sense. Like if that's why Joshua was punching him and that's why he's doing that, like I still strongly disagree with the idea of him just taking it from her forcefully, but at least the script makes more sense. Where in our like localized version, Western version, whatever, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But yeah, that was just a comment someone wrote on YouTube. Again, I'm a dumb bitch, so I didn't actually go and look up if that's true or not. But that's what the comment said, was that basically it got a little bit more localized for a Western audience. So yeah, to me, I was like, why the heck is he punching? Like, he didn't do anything. He didn't ask for her power. He seemed like he never even actually was gonna ask, but she offered it and he was like, yeah, that will help me, so I'll take, like, that was how the English version seems, but I guess in the Japanese version, it's a little bit different. So there's that. Okay, so now let's talk about the ending of the game. I was pretty much crying through the entire ending of the game, the entire final fight sequence, because, as you all know, Joshua dies. And here's the thing, I actually did expect Joshua to die, because, you know, from the time we actually reunite with him, he's like constantly coughing up blood, he's constantly like weak, and that was something I actually said to my friend. I was like, why are Joshua and Jill acting like Clive doesn't accept any help? Clive literally lets Joshua come with him multiple times, despite the fact that if Joshua was my brother and he was that sickly, there is no way in hell I would let him come with me. Like, Clive is like so nonchalant about the fact that Joshua's health is like really, really bad, and he still lets him come with him and like help him and do all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, I expected Joshua to pass away because he was so sick. I didn't know exactly when or how that would happen, but once we were getting towards the end, I was like, okay, this is it. Joshua's probably going to die in this battle because whether or not Ultima directly kills him, he will, he's so sick already that he'll use up his powers too much and that'll off him. So I did expect that he will pass away, but it was still so sad. Like, expecting it did not change the fact that it broke me into a million pieces, especially because they did such a good job animating Clive. The voice actor did a really good job. Oh my god, I was so upset. Oh my god, I'm getting upset thinking about it. I was like depressed after the ending, both because I finally finished a really good game and like I can never do it again. Like, you can never have your first time again with a game. So I was like, I had like the double depresso of being like, I finished a game and I really liked it and now I'm done and I'm sad that I'm done. But also because I was like kept thinking about the ending and thinking about Joshua. And then for me, the ending, I don't really like ambiguous endings. So it was slightly unsatisfying because I really appreciated the ending scene where like he says goodbye to everyone. The fight was really cool. All of this stuff, right? Like, I liked the ending in terms of like the way that it wrapped things up. We defeat Ultima, the fight is fun, like all of that stuff. But the ambiguity about like whether or not Clive lives, I really didn't enjoy. I personally do think he lived, but what I didn't like was I wanted a scene with Clive reuniting with Jill and hugging her because like before he leaves, like as he's leaving, like they jump off the side of the hideaway and then like they jump onto Dion, who transforms into Bahamut, like, and then Jill runs off and she's crying, like she runs to the edge and she's like crying as she watches them fly away. And then later when they're like in the room with Edna's baby, she looks to the star Metia and sees it fade away and she starts crying, like she runs out of the room crying and she hugs Torgal and it's like such a sad moment. What the fuck? It's so sad, but there is that moment where like the sun rises and she looks up and I almost thought it was gonna like pan over to Clive, like, up on the deck, like walking back over, but it didn't. So I was really like, for me, it just was not satisfying because I'm like, you go through this whole crisis, like the whole story is really high stakes. Like I said, it's kind of heavy. There's oppression, there's slavery, the world is like dying. People are dying left and right. I mean, a lot of them are side characters or like nobody characters, but like the world is not in a good state. And they've been through so much that I just wanted it to be like a happy ending where like I just had to watch Joshua die. I cried my eyes out for the 20 minutes that it took me to do the ending sequence. And then you can't even give me a hug between Clive and Jill as they reunite because he survived. Like, for me, that's everything that I would have wanted. And I'm going to be honest, I half expected that when Origin crumbled and Clive would be like falling through the sky, that Mid and the gang would show up on an airship and catch him. I'm not even kidding. I really thought that that was what they would do because throughout the story, his friends come and help him. They come and save him. And that was what I really wanted because the whole story is talking about how it's the power of friendship. Clive says that he couldn't do it without all of the people around him, that we as humans need to band together to overcome hardship. And it's true. Like, that's the message of the story. And then at the very end, he's basically saying to Ultima that the reason that he is more powerful is the power of friendship, that people had faith in him and that they helped each other and they worked together and did everything together and he never would be where he is without any of them. So it would have made way more sense to me if they would have showed up in their airship and caught him, okay? Instead of him falling through the sky into, I don't know, I guess the ocean and washing up on shore and then maybe he's dead. I mean, I really don't think he's dead. I really don't. But like, I just think we could have had a nice little bit of tied it together, happy ending. We deserve that. I deserve that after the trauma that I went through in this game, after all the tears that I had to shed over Sid and Joshua. I deserved Clive and Jill reuniting and hugging, and Clive and Gav too, okay? So I didn't love the ambiguity of the ending. It's absolutely not for me, but I did still love the game, and I did love the little after credits scene where they show us that the world has changed, that humans have survived, we're still living on, and we're living on without magic. We have science and engineering. I thought that was actually a really interesting and cool touch throughout the game, was that they used Sid's engineering skills and Mid's engineering skills and all of the people around them that had similar skills, gardening and all these things, to be like, hey, we don't actually need magic. We can do it with science and engineering. And I thought that was actually pretty neat. As much as I love magic and as much as it is a Final Fantasy game, kind of a cool touch, right? Kind of a unique thing to see in a fantasy game, that the end is like, hey, it's not really a fantasy game anymore. I don't know. Usually I probably wouldn't like that. I'd be like, ew, how lame, like magic is so much cooler. But because of the way that they set up this world, it was kind of doomed to fail to begin with because of Ultima creating magic and magic having that negative effect on the land and stripping the land of its fertility. I don't know. Overall, it was a really cool game. I think that's everything that I pretty much have to say about it. But yes, I do think that Clive survived. I wish the ending was a little bit happier, but overall, I still think the game was a 9 out of 10. So this was a really long little yap session, but I hope that you enjoyed listening to me. It seems like some of you guys do really enjoy these, which I'm grateful for because they're really, really fun for me to make. And they're kind of lazy. Like, I do try to put in as many clips as I can, depending on whether, if I'm trying to make something without spoilers, then I usually don't bother with too many clips. But yeah, I do just enjoy them because I just enjoy talking about things that I love. But yeah, let me know what you thought of the game. If you played it, I'd love to hear what your rating of the game would be. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Please consider leaving a sacrifice to Lord Algorithm in the form of a like, comment, share, or subscribe. And thank you so much to my channel members for supporting me. Bye!